do it.
Well, I feel for your son at this point, so.
Yeah, just bad dad jokes and bad life advice. I got you, bro.
I love that. That was
Hello.
better. And welcome to my guest today, Steve Walker, the CEO of TB Consulting in Phoenix, Arizona, Scottsdale, Arizona, depending on probably how you want to orient that. Looking forward to having the conversation. We're going to go into a number of things, a little bit about Steve. We're going to talk a little bit about the industry. We're going to go into really what he's looking for and where he thinks maybe IT professionals can continue to work to improve, and into a number of other topics as we delve into it. With that said, welcome, Steve.
Thanks, Jerry. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
And thanks for being patient enough to stalk me into this onto your show.
Well, I will say also thank you to you, because I totally punted on the last one, and I'm glad that we're finally getting a chance to do this. So I really do appreciate it. So with that said, one of my favorite questions in all of IT and all of our industry is to ask somebody, so how'd you get into IT? And so as the CEO of a small to medium sized business here in the Valley, how'd you get into that?
So it's really through my older brothers that exposed me to that. And, throughout the years, I was never like a computer guy, but I was the guy at the dorms in college that helped everyone put their computers together. And if something didn't work, I would hack my way through getting it to actually turn on. So just know enough to be dangerous is what I would say. And so really the funny thing is, I'm much more of a sales guy by trade, right? Graduated from San Diego State as a liberal studies major and a history major, which is really not very useful. And nobody wants to hire that guy. So immediately got into sales because that's the only thing they'll hire you for. And then quickly realized I didn't like being told what to do. So I started a company, had nothing to do with IT, but I was essentially the IT guy. And then grew that company. And I always thought, man, all of these IT companies are awful. If this job doesn't work out, or if this company doesn't work out, I should start an IT company, because, all you have to do is show up and not be mean. So fast forward, that company didn't work out, and I got into IT because I can speak to people and understand the bits and the bytes, and enough to get people excited about buying it, and have enough nerd credibility that the engineers don't think that I'm lying all the time, but not enough to put hands on keyboards. So I would say my older brothers are definitely influenced the IT space. And then, having to buy IT services from companies that broke my heart drove me into getting into the IT space. I was like, oh man, it's either get into IT or start mowing lawns, because then you could just be in the sun all day, and really I'd be in charge of my own schedule. So I went the IT path.
Got it. All right. So a couple questions. One, what was the company that you started that didn't work out? What did it do?
We did direct mail for mortgage companies back in the subprime early 2000s. So I there was a lot of predatory lending. I can proudly say that I never was part of a mortgage company. I didn't actually do any mortgages, but I may have been a little bit of a wartime profiteer. I was selling axes and shovels. I wasn't the guy actually panning for gold, so there was no blood on my hands.
Got it. That is a good analogy there. You were the guy selling the shovels. So, all right. And then
yes.
We won't get into, I think you're right, it's probably not appropriate for us to comment on how you, being the youngest of four, clearly makes you the baby golden child that mom and dad think is perfect. Since I'm a middle kid, I will tell you exactly that. And I think we move on. We'll just move on from that. We won't even get into it. And then
we could unpack that. A middle child syndrome is a real thing. And And I'll tell you what, it's better being the youngest. So I'm sorry.
I'm sure my younger brother would probably say the same. So, and then interesting that your brother. So I think you said your brother. Did he just kind of come back working, like using technology that kind of blew you away, or was he, because he was an architect, so he was like doing AutoCAD and stuff like that. So it was more like he was just leveraging technology, and you were like, "Holy mackerel, this is crazy."
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And then my other brother was really into computers, and he's a pilot now. But
Oh,
yeah, like we would set up our own LAN and we would play Doom, and it
oh,
was so
that's cool.
fun. It
Yeah.
was a first person shooter. That's shooting your own brother. Like there's a lot of value. That's fun.
That's
So
cool.
and yeah, so those guys, and it's funny. Like in the late '90s, I was, I graduated from high school in '98, but my brother, who was 10 years older than me, he was coming back with his friends from the Bay Area. I grew up in Vacaville, California. And so my brother was living in the Bay Area, and he was coming back with his friends, and they were driving some like brand new Mazda Miatas, and they had Oakley sunglasses, and they were riding that bubble in the late '90s of that tech balloon that was yet to burst. So it
Yeah,
was
right.
fun. It was fun to see that, growing up in Vacaville, they didn't have Mazda Miatas. No one drove one of those things. It was like, whoa, these guys are cool.
Uh, Nothing like seeing somebody else doing stuff like that. That makes you just, like be like, man, I want to do that, right? I want to get into that, whatever it is, whatever it was that they were doing, right? Like, and older kids,
Yeah.
right? Like just the draw of the older kids are doing it, and it wouldn't have, necessarily mattered. Like, I don't know, it's hard to a lot of the time make technology cool, but one sure way to do it is other people, like somebody you look up to, your brothers, etc., coming back with, "Hey, check this stuff out," right? So that's neat. That's a neat
Yeah.
story.
And a Mazda Miata with paper plates, that makes it pretty cool.
A Mazda Miata, man, that's a big deal. Not a big Mazda Miata fan, but I mean, they certainly had their place. Um, and then
We can agree to disagree.
fair enough. And then how did you get from that to really owning the, kind of getting, I mean, obviously you said you got into sales, and I'm assuming that it was sort of sales, and it kind of continued to grow. How did you ultimately end up in the you're a California guy, you end up owning a Scottsdale company?
Yeah, I think I had run a few companies before coming over to TBC. And it was, like I said, I was actually working at a small data center to really get my teeth cut in the IT space, before coming over to TBC. But that was always the intention is to take over TBC and,
Oh,
um, you know, uh, sit in this seat. So took a little longer than I wanted it to, but everything does. As a as
everything
a
does.
as a former project manager, you got to build in a little buffer. Sometimes it's 2 to 3 times budget. So
All
uh,
depending on who you
if you
asked on
can
the front
relate to
end,
that,
right? You ask a
yeah,
developer,
yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah,
3 times the time. If you ask
yeah,
infrastructure guy, is going to be 4 times the cost. So take your pick. Which of these
yeah.
poisons do
And
you want to swallow?
exactly. And it's a good thing I started, right? If I'd have known how much effort and work and heartache and sacrifice was involved, I might have said no. So I'm glad I sold myself on, oh, I got this.
Ah,
And then was just too stubborn or dumb enough to not give up. So, that's, you got to get started. It takes as long as it takes.
yeah, and that's good advice too, right? I think a lot of the time people get their mind wrapped, especially as a project manager myself, and um, you get your mind too far wrapped around the how long is it going to take, or is it perfect, or is the plan perfect, or is everything set, and you'll talk yourself out of doing just about anything. So yeah, I think that's a good point and good advice. uh
Yeah.
Okay,
You just got to get going.
yeah. So with that said, with a let's talk a little bit about kind of the industry as you see it today. I mean, especially you, I think, have a better grasp, honestly, of how ChatGPT is probably going to change the industry or how it's being leveraged in the industry. And I don't know how much of that you want to share and that sort of deal, but to me, that's one place that's changing a lot. But just in general, where do you see the industry going and that sort of thing?
Yeah. And I actually just was hanging out in Orlando, which is lovely this time of year. I was at a partner conference, and it was their big CIO executive symposium. Um, yeah, and it was like Chat GPT wasn't the theme, but it was like it is what everybody wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
And they talked about it quite a bit. And so I'm happy to unpack my thoughts on that.
Sure.
And then I think where the industry is headed in general, I think it's kind of the one and the same, but I think they are distinct. And I think there's so many different facets when you say the industry. Where is the industry headed? Right?
Sure.
Are we talking about internal teams? Are we talking about managed services? Are we talking about cloud? Are we talking about applications or consumer products and consumers consuming technology? I think that's the fun part about technology. There's so many different facets and so many different nuances inside of each one of those facets. So I'll get off my ethereal, confusing preface, and we could pick one, Jerry. Which one do you want to talk about?
We'll pick. So let's start with ChatGPT because I think it's I think it will have it seems like probably the biggest impact on our industry, and longest reaching impact on our industry over the next few years. But I do want to, with that in mind, keeping in mind that we're really thinking about people that are in our industry and have been in our industry for not really as long as you or I, right? So somebody that's maybe in the industry for a few years at this point, 5 years, maybe 10, and looking at their career with ChatGPT, in the crosshairs. Like, how is this going to change people's careers? How do people need to change to leverage that on a go forward basis so they don't find themselves out of a job? They don't find themselves the Fortran programmers of 2025.
Yeah. And I think that it's Chat GPT is the cool thing today. And I think it is really cool, and I think it's wildly disruptive, and I think it's going to change everything. So I want to just make sure I'm not downplaying it. It's crazy awesome and scary and everything else in between. But I think that, as you were just talking about antiquated technology, like the technology is constantly moving. And I think that, this is the way I've always done it. That should be a curse word. That should be a 4-letter word. Really you always have to be looking at.
We should create a curse word for whatever that is. This is how I've always done it. Yeah. It needs to have a curse word.
This is the way I've always done it.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to write that down.
Yeah. That deserves a soap in the mouth. Put soap in your mouth, Johnny. So, but you talk about network, or you talk about server huggers. You talk about. I think what it is. I think it's really the paradigm of prioritizing technology over the use case. Right. I love blinky lights. I love my duffel bag full of dongles because it makes me feel special. So the dongles are there for a reason. Right? And at some point, it was cool to command line into stuff and be in the guts of it. But that's all been replaced, and it's all software. And then next thing you know, there's going to be Chat GPT. And I think as you move from dongles and command line to where we're at with software, everything, it's really about getting IT professionals to understand how to leverage technology to make an outcome happen. So if you could always stay like just focus on what value are you providing, you'll be okay. And leveraging technology to make that outcome happen. Technologists are the best people to make that dream come true, because we all know what happens if we give business people who know what the outcome is technology. They're going to make a mess of it, right? I think the cloud is a great example of that. And cloud is awesome. But when you give that to a bunch of uh, business minded folks, they no longer have to go to the Department of No to stand up a development server. That was me being sarcastic. You don't have to go ask IT and wait for long lead times, and your ideas change by the time they actually stand it up. But I can go to the cloud, but there's no governance. The risks are all over the place, and shadow IT and cloud sprawl and cloud spend and all that. But I think what it did is it disrupted the industry to get people to think that, oh, I can't control everything. I need to support the business, and I need to help them understand how to use it and be an enabler, not a keeper of the gates, right? So I think that cloud has done a great job of changing that paradigm, where you no longer have to deal with the Department of No, but now I have governance risks, and I have risk all over the place because there's nobody keeping eyes on the everything outside of the moat. So I think that's been interesting, and I think as we move towards Chat GPT, I think it's going to be crazy, and I think it's going to we're far from the days of having a dongle. Like anything that is repeatable or anything that is that could be learned, a textbook will eventually be automated, right? But and not very far from now, not like soon. So I think it's going to be. I think there is going to be two types of companies coming out of 2024. There's going to be companies that are all in on AI, and there's several different layers of AI, or there's companies that are going to get left behind. I think it's going to happen pretty fast. You're either going to get on board, or you're going to get that train will have left the station, and at best you can hope to emulate whatever other people are doing just to stay in the game.
So do you think that'll be, I guess it sounds to me, and it makes sense that like as a technology company, absolutely you have to recognize the value and how much that's changing sort of your world, if you will. So as a managed service provider, that's key. As the systems that you and the company, your company, manage for other people, you have to be on top of that. But as a company that let's say manufactures widgets, do you think they'll be looking at companies like TBC saying, hey, we need you to get to get us to that next level, and we sort of expect you to be using AI, just like somebody might say today, I would expect you to be using the cloud? Or do you think those companies are going to say, I don't need technologists anymore, I'm just going to be doing this on my own, right? It's the technology is so advanced that we just don't need technologists anymore. I just ask this computer to do for me, and it just does it.
I think that eventually probably will be there, that you don't need to interact with an IT organization. I think there's lots of ground to cover until we get there. I think that there's a lot of work to do to be able to leverage AI, right? AI is only good at making decisions based on information. And so if you're not organized and your data is a mess, there's nothing AI can really do with it, right? If it's in a bunch of different silos and it's not contextualized, and if it's not normalized, like there's nothing to look at, right? The AI has nothing to contemplate, right? So I think there's going to be a lot of work to help companies get ready to make the most out of getting their environments to be integrated. I think that's a whole body of work just to get your environment to get integrated, and to figure out how are you going to normalize the data across your disparate platforms and all of your different tools. And how are you going to have you have to have a process, right? If that without a process, there's not much that AI can do with that. I think eventually AI will be able to write your process, and it could probably help you integrate those environments, and write some JSON or write some scripts to marry those two. But it'll have to get done. And there also needs to be a lot. There's to be a lot of work to help the emotional people involved in this inside of organization to all agree on what the heck AI means to them.
Sure. Yeah.
That's a lot of work in and of itself, right? You get a bunch of technologists in a room. You talk about AI. Everybody walks away with a different opinion. You get a bunch of business people in the room and talk about AI. Like it's going to be a tricky one to get that to stick and get people to stay focused and understand what it is and what it isn't, how it's applicable to them and their use case, right? So I think that's, and I'm kind of talking about it in the context of a manufacturer, right?
Yeah, right.
When you talk about Chat GPT and the use case on what companies are going to do to create end user experiences, and different applications and apps and cool stuff that's going to happen, and having an online best friend that knows who you are and knows exactly the temperature of apple pies that you like, and like intimate and all, like that's going to be some real weird stuff. That's going to be real weird.
Yeah.
So it'll be fun and I think that'll happen sooner rather than later. And I think it'll happen before manufacturing companies figure out what to do with this technology.
Yeah, I mean, it has that sort of, if you watch the movie Her, it has kind of that Her feeling already without any of the business implications behind that or anything. Just it's sort of already there. One thing that I do think, just from a positive perspective, I think from an elder care perspective, it feels to me like it could be very valuable as generations age, the ability to for an older person to continue to have a conversation, an intelligent and enlightening conversation that if it's repetitive, the system doesn't care. It doesn't care that they've had this conversation 100 times, kind of thing, where a human might wear on us emotionally, especially if it is your parents. Just the almost the emotional burden of knowing that this is because their mind is not what it used to be, that a computer doesn't have that. And so I really think there's really, to me at least, I thought initially my mind went to that, probably because I'm a little bit aging parents, and I don't want to, I want to see them not have people to talk to.
As you think through how to become the golden child, maybe at the end of the race, you steal the show by having a Jerry avatar that's there for his mother.
That's my plan. That's my plan.
I like it.
My overall objective is to make sure that I get all of the inheritance, just to prove to my brothers, even if ultimately I give them their share, just to prove that I was always the kid,
Yeah. No one's keeping score, but I am the trustee, just for the record, and it is up to me because I'm the chosen one.
Nobody's keeping.
Yeah, I like that. It's the Jerry Golden Son avatar.
Yes.
For the win. I like that.
I like it. So with that said, though, where do you think from I guess even less, not in the next 5 years, in the next really year, where would you say IT professionals should be maybe directing them their learning when it comes to kind of where the industry is going?
Yeah, I think it's really important to understand. I think understanding AI in general. I think spending a lot of time in is this AI in the context of all right, there's AI built into a tool or a function that's native AI specifically to a tool, or are we talking about machine learning AI, and how can machine learning be layered on top of um, algorithmic AI, and then how can then the chat GPTs or the LLM AIs be layered on top of that, right? And think about it from a closed loop perspective. I think it's key to understand it, and then get ahead of it. And I think being a disciple of AI is going to put you in a spot where you're going to be relevant. But thinking that this is like jazzercise and it's just a fad is probably going to leave you at the train station wondering when the next train's coming.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I agree with that for sure.
and I think what this will do is, and it's very similar to, the way the industry has been headed, where, it's all about good documentation on what you have. And the goal is to get the work that could be done by other people off your plate, and then move your name down the escalation list as quickly as possible. Because the further down you go on the escalation list, the more valuable you are, right? So in that same notion, right, it's just going to move that stuff faster, right? Because the goal was to get it to an entry level person, and they could do help desk level, and then hopefully the help desk can start doing tier one stuff with good enough documentation. And now the goal is to have the engineers design it, architect it, document it, run it, train people on it, and then get it off to the help desk. And now it's like, get it off the help desk and get it over to AI, right? Because if it can be done by training someone to do it, and there is a yes, no, if no, then do this, give that to automate that.
Sure.
Right. And so, I think from a managed services perspective, this AI is great, because for us, it's all about efficiencies and how can we be the most effective for our clients, because we can't do it the same way they did it and expect them to pay more by doing it just as bad as they did it.
Sure.
Right. That means they're gonna have to pay us more. But we have to do it better than they could do it, and we have to do it with less people and be more effective as an organization. So we need to save them money, and we need to deliver better results. Otherwise, they get to fire us. So, I'm excited about where it's headed, and I think I think AI is amazing, and it just is. But it requires discipline at the front end, and for you to have some very fundamental foundational pieces in place before you could take advantage of AI, because it's really just a process magically happening against data. So if you don't have a process, you don't have data, there's nothing for AI to do.
Interesting. I like that. I think right now I would just tell people, hey, if you're in IT and you haven't used ChatGPT yet, then I would say you're already somewhat behind the curve. You probably need to go start using ChatGPT just to understand. It'd be essentially like somebody saying, whatever, 20 years ago or however long it was, you're in IT and you don't even know what the internet is. You haven't even used it once. Why didn't you try? What's holding you back? Oh, I don't think it's important. Well, you probably need to be spending some time in it. And then from there, I think you're right. It's just a matter. And I love it's a process acting on data. And, if you think about it in that simple of terms, then how could you use that? And then, in our world, everything's a process, everything's data. How can you use that? And how could you help customers with that? And how could you help other people with that? And whatever that is, start thinking about it.
Yeah. And I think the interesting thing will be, because there's like, I think that the business use case or business to business use case is very interesting. And I think it's fairly different than your golden child avatar use case of ChatGPT. I think that's wildly different. Because I think on the business side, right, I think there's a whole lot of privacy. I mean, there also is a lot of privacy issues when it comes to your avatar hanging out with your mom. But I think the data associated, I mean, guess with your mom's conversations, you like to keep that private as well. But the IP associated with business data, I think we need to figure out how we um, can leverage the power of the pooled learning while maintaining privacy for your IP data. And I think that'll be
Sure.
super interesting. I think there'll be a lot of arguments around IP on
Yeah.
what is something that I created and what is something that
Oh yeah.
the AI created, right? And
For
who
sure.
owns that? So a lot of that stuff's going to have to get fleshed out. But it is scary how fast it's coming out and how quickly it is getting better and how it is essentially you're not just doing mundane tasks, but it's writing complicated code, right?
Yeah.
And there's some issues with the code, and you get a senior developer to review that. But I mean, you're talking about having a senior developer have an army of minions write code that would have taken you know level one
Right.
developers months to create, and they're done. It's done in 10 minutes,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
now. So I think that's interesting. Augmenting one really smart a team of smart developers. I mean, you could really get a lot of horsepower out of them. And I don't know if you know a lot of senior developers, but they're not like they like to just tell people to do stuff. Don't like to talk about feelings. So I could see how they would be really happy as a result of
100%.
this, not having to talk about feelings uh, and getting a lot of stuff done. It's a
Yeah.
cool place for them.
And then oddly, it's kind of, I guess you said a couple of things there. And the one is all our technology up until this point has been dependent on it improving, is dependent on really effectively the people that created it, right? So, hey, we made the internet, but then we had to make the internet better, and humans had to do that, and humans had to think through. And we're at a point where the technology is thinking for itself on how to make itself better. And it's a lot faster and better at that than we are. And therefore, it is going to advance much faster than anything we've seen before. And then, like you said, the concept of a a technologist, a programmer, a senior developer, whomever, looking at, literally turning and leveraging and saying, yeah, I've got these 10, 20, 100. You can actually train one of them to be you, so that now there's multiple, sort of multiple copies of multiple yous out there.
Yeah,
It's
I mean
really striking how fast.
that's the part that's scary because you
Yeah.
get one senior developer that is training. It's it's instant, and eventually it will emulate that
Yeah.
person,
Yep.
and oh, and it's going to learn. And that, yeah, you're right. So I think the part that's going to be really scary is when it finally closes its own loop.
Yeah. Yes.
I don't know how to put that genie back in the bottle, but
No. I do think that's
you
what
know,
Elon Musk is warning us all about is, hey, we need to be putting some restrictions on these things to a level to keep it from figuring some things out. And some of the stories that came out, like the Facebook had two AI systems that they had talking to each other that ultimately created their own language, and they shut it down because they didn't that no one could decipher what the language
you
meant or
couldn't
how it was
understand it.
used, right? And so you go,
It's like
wait,
elfish.
wait, what happened? It doesn't take very long before you go, oh, that raised the hairs on the back of my neck just now. So yeah, it's interesting. So okay, so as professionals, what we'd say is don't let it leave you behind. Start investigating right now, and think of it the way that you're sort of thinking of it, as not as oh, is this thing going to take my job? How can you leverage it? How can you leverage it to provide more value? How can you leverage it to change the way you work, to change the way other people work? Be thinking about those things, because that's going to be the first evolution of it, is people that are able to do that. They're going to come to you and say, can you do that? And if your answer is yeah, absolutely, I'm ready to show you how to leverage this in different ways. Well, now you're a valuable person to a business, to your own business, to others' businesses, as opposed to, yeah, I didn't want to get into it because it scared me. And now you're, like you said, you're at the train station waiting for the next
Yeah.
train.
Yeah. Well, that'll be a self-fulfilling destiny. It scared me. And I was scared I was going to take my job, and it took my job. Right.
Yeah, right.
That's what a therapist will tell you years down the road as a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Very true.
If you treat your spouse as a cheater and you don't trust them, and you are mean to them, you will create your own
Your own
hopes and dreams out of that.
dream.
That's a self-fulfilling prophecy, my friends. It's maybe we should cut that one from
Yeah.
the
Well, I like it. I think it's sage
or
advice.
maybe
And it's not
yeah,
just about, this
yeah,
isn't
yeah,
just about technology, right? Hey, as a young professional, think about what Steve just said, and
yeah,
don't
yeah,
do that either.
yeah,
With that
yeah.
said,
Yeah,
let's
be nice to your spouse
right.
and and ride the wave. I mean, you're essentially you're either growing or you're dying, and you should be always be on offense. I'm not saying that you should be mean to people, but you should always be growing, and you don't look at it as this is going to take my job. It's like this is a great opportunity for me to grow and take
Great.
uh, more work, more responsibility, and if you want to grow, I mean, provide more value.